Let's move on now. A new bromance is brewing on the global stage. In 2 days, U.S. President Joe Biden will meet his Chinese counterpart Xi Jinping. This will be at the APEC Summit in San Francisco. The last time the two leaders met was in November 2022. It has been a year since. U.S. China ties have only frayed after that. And now, all eyes are on the Wednesday meeting. So what's on the agenda? What will President Biden and Xi talk about? Will the relations between the U.S. and China thaw? Will the fraying ties be stabilized? Let me break it all down for you. Number one, the U.S. seeks to restore military-to-military communication with China. This is high on President Biden's priority list. He's expected to advance the ball with Xi on military ties. I'm not the one who's saying this. It's America's National Security Advisor, Jake Sullivan. He said, and I quote, "The president is determined to see the re-establishment of military-to-military ties because he believes it's in the U.S. national security interest. We need those lines of communication so that there are not any mistakes or miscalculations or miscommunications." You see, when the then House Speaker Nancy Pelosi visited Taiwan last year, Beijing abruptly cut off communication with the U.S. military. This raised concerns among American officials. They feared possible miscommunication or miscalculation in the South China Sea or around Taiwan, since the waters are highly contested. A steady stream of Biden administration officials have since visited Beijing. This includes Secretary of State Antony Blinken, Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen, and Commerce Secretary Gina Raimondo. Yet, the military channels have not been restored. So will this upcoming meeting between President Biden and Xi reopen the military communication? Next on the agenda would be Taiwan. The island is set to have elections in January 2024. This may ramp up sensitivities around its the status quo. As it is, China regularly showcases its power with military exercises off Taiwan's coast. Chinese leaders have stepped up their threats against Taiwanese independence. For the U.S., Taiwan is an important partner in the Indo-Pacific. So will it be able to manage credible non-war guarantees from China? We can't say what President Xi's response would be, but we do know this. And that is what the U.S. wants. Another thing on the agenda would be what's happening in West Asia, the Israel-Hamas war. The U.S. needs to work closely with China given its growing influence in the region. Traditionally, China only focused on economic engagement with the Arab world, but now it has been more than willing to mediate regional conflict. Earlier in the year, China brokered the Saudi-Iran normalization agreement. It has also shown interest in de-escalating the Israel-Palestine crisis, which the U.S. can use to its advantage. China has also shown inclination towards renewing the Iran nuclear deal. Next, Biden and Xi are also expected to discuss Iran. The National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan says, and I quote again, "The question of Iran's nuclear program and the threat it poses will be on the agenda of the meet, as will the threat that Iran poses to regional stability and the threat it poses to U.S. forces in the region." For years now, the U.S. has been imposing sanctions on Iran. It is seeking to tighten them even further. But Iran is a key source of oil for China. So will President Biden ask Xi Jinping to stop buying Iranian oil on the cheap? Also on the table are areas of potential cooperation, like climate change and countering narcotics trafficking. Not to forget the deep disagreements over human rights issues. Last year, when President Biden and Xi Jinping departed Indonesia after meeting, they appeared to be on track to engage in more regular talks. But only months later, the hopes for normalizing ties between the U.S. and China were scuttled. A Chinese spy balloon. Close encounters in both the air and the Taiwan Strait. Diplomatic spats over the theft of technology, hacking and trade. A drought of military-to-military talks, even the lapse of a panda agreement, all of this has delivered sharp blows to U.S.-China diplomatic ties. And it happened despite a deep and apparently warm personal relationship that Biden and Xi cultivated during their time as vice presidents. So, will the upcoming meeting see more of this bromance? We'll have to wait and watch. WION World is now available in your country. Download the app now and get all the news updates on the move.